All right, let's get into it. Today we're looking at a title that sounds incredibly official, doesn't it? British Literary Giants and the UK Canon. I mean, it sounds like something that's been carved into a stone tablet somewhere, right? The definitive final list.
But here's the thing. The moment you say that out loud, a huge question just pops into your head. Who actually gets to decide? Who anoints an author and says, "Yup, you're a giant"? That's the real question we're digging into today.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by pulling apart the big questions that are just hiding in that title. Then we'll try to pin down what it even means to be a literary giant. After that, we'll unpack this whole idea of a literary canon, look at the challenges around the term UK, and finally, we'll talk about why any of this still matters to us today.
So let's start right there, with the title itself. You know, sometimes the most fascinating part of any subject isn't the answer, but all the assumptions that are baked right into the question.
So, to be super clear, the point of this whole explainer is not to just hand you a top 10 list of British authors. Nope. We're actually putting the words themselves under a microscope. We're going to question what giant, canon, and even British really mean.
Let's tackle that first big word, giant. What does it really take for an author to be seen as one of the greats? It sounds like it should be obvious, but it's actually really slippery.
I mean, what are we even measuring? Is it all about selling millions of books? Or is it about having a lasting influence on other writers for generations to come? Maybe it's about winning all the fancy awards. Or is the real test whether you're still being studied in universities 100 years later? You see, each one of those yardsticks would give you a completely different list of giants.
And that's the key takeaway here. There is no single objective formula for greatness. Take a poet like John Donne. For centuries after he died, he was basically forgotten. But then, in the 20th century, hugely influential poets like T.S. Eliot brought his work back, and bam, he's a giant again. It just goes to show you that the label is totally subjective. It's really a reflection of what a culture values at a specific moment in time.
This leads us perfectly into our next term, the canon. See, if giants are the authors, then the canon is the official list of their work. It's kind of like the literary world's Hall of Fame.
So, the official definition says the literary canon is a collection of works that are considered the most important for a certain time or place. But you gotta pay attention to the key phrase in there. It's an influential group that does the deciding. This is not a popular vote, not by a long shot.
So how does a book even get into this exclusive club? Well, it usually follows a path that looks something like this. First, someone writes something that really makes waves. Then, powerful critics and academics start talking it up. Pretty soon, it gets added to the syllabus at universities, and before you know it, it's a classic that gets taught over and over, cementing its spot on the list.
And this just shows you that the canon isn't some fixed thing. Back in the 1800s, it was pretty much all wealthy white guys from England. But by the middle of the 1900s, you start to see brilliant female writers like Virginia Woolf breaking through. Then, in the late 1900s, powerful voices like Chinua Achebe started to challenge the whole list from a post-colonial perspective. And today, that conversation is more intense and important than ever.
Okay, on to the last piece of the puzzle, the UK part. This seems simple, right? But the word British actually hides a huge oversimplification and a really interesting history that's worth looking at.
For a long time, when people said the British canon, what they really meant was the English canon. Shakespeare, Dickens, Austen, all from England. But a true UK canon has to be so much more than that. To be actually representative, it has to include the foundational, unique, and powerful literary voices from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland too.
So, we've taken apart all these terms, and you might be thinking, okay, but why does this academic idea of a canon even matter to me? Well, the truth is, its impact is, it's everywhere.
The canon is the reason you were assigned certain books in school. It's why some books get those fancy classics editions at the bookstore. But even bigger than that, it shapes our whole understanding of national identity. The stories we choose to lift up as great tell a much larger story about who we think we are as a society and who gets to be included in that story.
And this, right here, really gets to the heart of it. We should probably think of the canon less like a dusty old bookshelf and more like a loud, messy, and totally vital conversation about what we, as a culture, think is important and worth remembering.
Which leads us to one final really big question. For most of history, the canon was decided by a very small, very similar group of people. But today, in a world where anyone